to Global Studies, everybody. We're so happy that you could be with us again today for the last Global Studies presentation of this semester. And today we have a very special guest I will be introducing in a moment. Let me just tell you a little bit about our Global Studies program at Leeward Community College. So this is a program that is designed to promote international awareness and understanding among our students and to create more internationally minded and engaged citizens of the world, as we like to say. And we do offer a certificate, an academic subject certificate in global studies, and it builds upon the strengths of our Hawaiian program here and our multi-ethnic communities here on campus and in Hawaii. And it also brings in the rest of the world so that our students get a focus on international economics and international history and religion and business. There's a language, foreign language component to it. And it's a good thing to have in your back pocket as you graduate. It doesn't require you to do any extra courses. You can simply tweak your program as you go through to include courses that can count towards the Global Studies certificate. And then you wind up with 2 qualifications when you graduate. You get your AA and you get your subject certificate. So if you would like more information on that, you can see me, Professor Scotti. My email is sdscotti@hawaii.edu, or Dr. Kareem Khan, who is the founder of our program and who is here today. And his email is khana@hawaii.edu. And either of us would be happy to walk you through it. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to introduce our honored guest, who just happens to be, lucky me, my student this semester at Leeward, and her name is Apryl Binuya. And Apryl is a senior actually at UH Manoa, and she is majoring in studio arts. And she began her degree program in 2007 and has pursued many different career paths in between, which we'll hear about today. So Apryl's path from growing up in the Midwest in Indiana to becoming an airline pilot is a story of resilience and ambition, in her words. Travel being a main component in her success, she'll discuss today her world travels, adversity, it hasn't always been easy, I'm sure, and where she is headed now. So a very warm aloha to you, Apryl. If you were here in person, I would put a lei around your neck.
All right. Well, thank you for that warm aloha, welcome. And thank you everybody for coming here today. It's as Professor pointed out, I'm an airline pilot, but I really thank you for coming to this talk today. And I thoroughly enjoy all her classes. I'm an art studio major, so my focus is on doing. And I wasn't all that thrilled, honestly, about taking art history. But Professor Scotti turned that right around for me to the point where I am looking into masters in art history and things like that. So she's an amazing instructor. If you get a chance to meet her in person, you should do so at Leeward at the art museum here in Honolulu, and her classes 175 and 176. I got both classes, so I've quite enjoyed those. So if you have art history in your curriculum, you should definitely take it with her. So as she mentioned, I started classes in 2007, and that is not the usual graduation timeline for most people. You're wondering probably why it's taken me 20 years to become a senior. So my childhood, I was born in 1977 in a small Midwest town. Noblesville was a small Noblesville, Indiana was a small farming town. And I lived in what was closer to, I would say, The Handmaid's Tale, if you've ever seen it. It's a book from Margaret Atwood right now, and it is out in a movie, or I guess it's a show, the series, right, called The Handmaid's Tale. It's very good, but my childhood was closer to that than it was to Sesame Street. And it was a very closed culture with very little social contact with anybody on the outside. My parents had been born into it, and I then was also born into it. So there was a very strict code of behavior that needed to be followed. And if I didn't follow those, I would lose everyone that I ever knew. So it's hard to describe that. So when I walked through that door at 22 years age, 22 years old, and started living life, I had left a community I grew up in. And was about 250 people I've been raised with. I had 4 brothers and sisters, my parents, my grandparents, nieces and nephews, and I knew that I would never see them again. But I also knew that there was a whole life out there waiting for me to learn about, and I knew nothing about. So from that point on, I basically wanted to learn everything I could about the world. So this was before the internet, so I knew about 5 people on the planet, which brings me to my first job, and that was arresting shoplifters as a plainclothes store detective. So if you will, I kind of turned into June from the book, basically seeking justice for all, and arresting shoplifters, plainclothes. It was quite the transition going from those two. After a while, this led me to become a police officer, and I graduated at the 163rd class of the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And you'll know this, Prescott in Plainfield, Indiana. And this is me and my lieutenant and his wife. And this is about 10 years after the police academy, but they took me under their wing, and became my family. And after a few years as a street police officer, I kind of wanted to spread my wings outside of Indiana. So I applied for a position as a surveillance officer for Norwegian Cruise Lines, which brought me here to Honolulu, Hawaii. So my job and our job in our department was to make sure that the passengers and the crew were safe and that we were adhering to maritime and local laws. So I had basically plain clothes, walking around the ship, and was in passenger areas. There was a lot of downtime during that time, so I had a side gig. After a while, I started working in the theater. And in a theater, on the theater production, there'll be a spotlight operator, and they will sit up here at the very top where those lights are, and they will follow the main character around and turn the light on and off when that person's turn for performing is. So I would go sit up there, and during the productions, I would do the spotlight, and I learned a little bit of theater sound and lighting. And I sailed around. We would go island to island. So every night we would move to a different port. So I had, I had P.O. Box in Maui, and then I got my groceries in Chinatown in Honolulu. So when you go to work on a ship, everyone's required to have a document or a license. It's called Merchant Mariner's document. And it's a very valuable document because there's a lot of training that goes into having that. And it's very difficult to get on your own, but 6 months of training before you can go work on a ship, doing various things on a ship. And on that ship, I got additional training in damage control, if there would be any sort of hull breach. I've got the job of launching and recovering these lifeboats, and a job as a coxswain, which is driving a boat that's on a ship and usually steers the boat. So if we were to evacuate that ship, I would be driving one of those boats. And this is not the bridge of a cruise ship, but luckily for AI, we can now describe our imagination or our memories, and I can describe it to you. You get a full visual of what I saw, right? So I had full access to the ship, and I would go up to the bridge and hang out at the bridge because it was beautiful. Floor to ceiling windows. We go past Nepali coast, and there were dolphins and whales, and it was beautiful. And I would talk to the mates, and I was, like, how did you do this? How did you get here? And like, this has got to be the best job in the world. You get to sit here and drive this giant ship around Hawaii, right? And so they told me, you actually are already qualified to start working on ships. I had no idea, right? That Merchant Mariner's document that I had gotten from the cruise line gave me permission to work on any ship in the United States, or actually any country really, but mostly the United States, right? So I thought, I'm just going to go drive cruise ships. This is amazing. So after about a year, I went to Military Seal of Command, which is part of the military. It's a civilian contractor for the military. And what they told me about an entry-level position where you work your way from the bottom up to an officer or a mate. And it's a process called hawse piping. And a hawse pipe is where the chain goes through the hull of a ship where to lower the anchor. And it's kind of a sailor term for sneaking your way up into the mates categories, or hawse pipe your way up, work your way up to the top, which is how I found myself being flown to Greece, which was the first country I'd ever been to outside the United States. I also found myself here, which was at the bottom of that tanker, bucketing out fuel in 5-gallon buckets for about 2 weeks, up to our thighs in fuel. So we were cleaning the bottom of this tanker on the way back over the Atlantic back to Virginia. And I thought, what have I done? Like, I have ruined my life. Like, I had such a good, cushy job on this cruise ship, and this is not what I was signing up for. And I was crying, and I was so upset, thinking I had ruined my career, ruined my life. And I was at the bottom of this tanker, and just, it was horrible. I was at the bottom of the barrel, literally. But I got back to Virginia, and I met this girl. But there was basically a facility where all the workers would go and get their next assignment. And so after that 2-week stint of going across the Atlantic, I was in this place and waiting for my next assignment. And I met this girl, and she was crying. And I said, "What is wrong? What's going on?" She said, "Well, I'm 19 years old. My parents both died this year, and I just got this job, and I've never been outside the United States, and they're sending me to Japan." And she was so upset. And I was like, "Japan? Tell them I'll go. Like, I'm on the way. Just tell them that you want to stay here and you want to stay in Virginia, and I'm going to go to Japan." And so she did. She called them, and she's like, we're going to switch. And they said, "Okay, we'll talk to the captain and we'll see what the captain says." So he calls the captain, and the captain says, "Send them both." So off we went to Japan, and we landed in Sasebo, Japan, to do a decommissioning of a military ship. And decommissioning means the military is no longer in charge of this ship, and they've handed it over to either be, used for something else, or in this case, it was for civilians to operate it through the military. And that ship was a USNS Safeguard, which is a deep sea, U.S. Navy deep sea diver ship. So the U.S. Navy divers will deploy out to it for 6 months, and the civilians will operate it. So there were 17 of us and 17 divers. When the military had it, there was 105 people on it. So we were down to 34 people from 105, which meant that I had a lot of jobs to do on that. What the Navy divers did is they would do basically underwater construction workers, but it's recovery, underwater welding, and things like that. And then here is a top view of the deck that we worked out of. I got to drive these boats are fast boats. So our new lifeboats were these fast boats. So I was in charge of driving these boats. Everyone on the boat at some point was trained to drive these. So I got to drive these fast boats, and I would work in various areas of the ship. Since there was only about 34 of us, half those people were on the bridge, not half, a lot of those people were on the bridge doing various things. We would all work together. This was an old ship, so we didn't have a lot of electrical help. So we would have these giant chains and these heavy lines, and we would need to pull this whole entire ship up against the pier. So we would be out there, 4 or 5 of us on one line pulling the ship in. And when it was done, I was in charge of one of the groups of tying up. So, but it was definitely a team sport, getting a giant ship tied up next to a pier. And when we were underway, I learned ship navigation. I learned celestial navigation. I did mathematics to learn navigation by the sun. I did charting. I learned to use the equipment. And basically, my captain was a very big proponent of women learning. So out of the 17 civilians, half of those were female when we started. I was on that ship for 4 years. By the time it was finished, I was the only girl left. But I learned a lot, and I was prepared to be a third mate, which would have been in charge of driving the large ship. We had watches. They were about 4 hours long. So we'd do 4 a.m. Mine was 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. We visited lots of places. One of the places we visited was Saipan, which is a territory of the United States off of Guam. And we were there on and off for about 3 years. There would be coral heads, giant coral heads that would grow inside the channel. And most of their supplies were delivered to that ship through that channel. So to prevent ships from going aground, we would clear that channel out. Another place we went is a Micronesian island named Yap. And it's a world-class diving. Since Navy divers also like to dive for fun, you kind of develop this weird underwater world where you do everything underwater and it seems normal. So we would visit a lot of the places that have world-class diving. Unfortunately, I learned to dive in those locations. So now if I want to dive anywhere, I kind of get spoiled because it, so Hawaii has nice diving too, but this is a manta ray from Yap. And in Yap, we were doing very similar things, repairing and floating things out of the channel. So this is a ship that had sunk in the channel. These Navy divers were actually patching this ship enough to be able to float it out of the harbor. Another thing they did was pretty fun was they would recover World War II dog tags. There was a whole program to go through and find missing in action dog tags to return them to their families. So we did a lot of that there as well. And in Yap, this guy came out, was deployed out to the ship as he was in the military, and was assigned to our ship. We started dating. So there's me, my Laura, and this guy, and we had this is my new family, and we had a great time for about 3 years. We traveled all over the world and had great fun. A lot of our work was training allies in Navy diving equipment so that they would have the same training and the same equipment. And so we would basically all over Asia, we would train all the allies militaries on diving. So I got to meet lots of people coming and going from our ship. One of the most interesting places I went was Bangladesh. It's not a place that you get to visit often. We did some PR work there, public relations work, and we repaired a school. So these are some of the school children. This is the inside of their school. Books look a little different than ours. Still one of my favorite times of my life. The kids were just so excited to be there, to interact with someone different, and I was so excited to be there to act, as well. And we were just massed with kids. There's me in the corner, and just happy kids everywhere. So I got to go to a lot of countries. I've kind of lost track, but I think I'm around 30 countries. So there's some countries I've been to. A lot of those, maybe half of those, 3/4 of those were from those years. Got married in San Diego, where the kid's dad is from, and we went on a biplane ride. So there we are in San Diego at Montgomery Field doing just a fun airplane ride. And we got orders back to Japan, which was great because we'd already been there for 3 years. And by that point, we were pretty comfortable in Japan. And just some fun things that happen in Japan is if you have a problem getting your ticket, you can push a help button and a little man pops out from the wall, which is always startling the first time it happens, because it just it's very personal help, but it feels a little startling when someone pops out of the wall, like from Wizard of Oz. The kids, the kids are raised to be very independent from the time they're small. They'll go to first grade on their own on the train. So late at night, they all have after school activities and things are continually learning. Late at night, they'll just be on their own. There I am. I started teaching English in Japan. There I am. And I also started learning Japanese. By the time I left, I was fluent enough to speak on the phone, which was pretty good. I've lost it ever since. It's been a while, but I still can understand most, I think. And when I was taking English classes, or I was teaching English classes and taking Japanese classes, I met this girl. And it was about an hour from my house. And it turned out her name is Kayoko. She's my best friend to this day. She lived a block down the street from me. So literally for the next 3 years, we were inseparable. Because of that, I got to learn many, many things that I wouldn't have gotten to, been introduced to. So this is the summer kimono. Her mom's job was hand sewing kimonos. So this would be it was a friendship day we had. And so they would dress me. And we just lived our 30s having fun, running around, learning all kinds of things, doing all kinds of, young people stuff. I got to learn about Japanese graveyards. We went to eat peaches with the ancestors. The whole entire family's grave site is in this area, is inside of this container, I guess you would say. And so we would go and visit the grave, and we would eat peaches and drink sake with the ancestors. Let's see. On March 11th, 2012, at 2:46, I was teaching English it was a classroom of Japanese young children when the Tohoku earthquake happened. And it was a 9.0 in Japanese standards and a 10.0 in US standards. It lasted 6 minutes. Those earthquakes, aftershocks lasted for about several weeks to months after that. And about 20,000 people died as a result of the tsunami that happened from that earthquake. So please hold those in your thoughts and those people in your thoughts. So Kayoko's family was from Sendai, where the tsunami hit after the earthquake. And it was quite a stressful time during that time. But about 6 months after that, after things had calmed down, and we went to go check on them. And those images you saw were actually from Sendai 6 months after, where they had cleaned up. So that tsunami went 6 miles in. Those trees that you saw were 6 miles in from the shore. And when they went to high ground, they were climbing up the side of those mountains. So luckily her family was okay. And we got to experience some farm life. This is her uncle with a giant vegetable. And this is how they would fish. And this is their version of spearfishing. This is a Japanese farmhouse. Her aunt's weighing out the salt to do salted cucumbers. Doesn't look like a farmhouse to us, but it is a farmhouse, and those would be like farm boots and shoes. And this is a farm dinner: fish, vegetables, rice, tea. To this day, this is pretty much how my family eats. This is what we're accustomed to eating. So this is her grandparents' house, which is a really old. So this would have been those people's parents' house, right? So interesting, and kind of like a relic of time captured. The calendar's still on the wall. These were awards that he had gotten, and just kind of, and they're shrined, just a time capsule, really. During the earthquake, I spent those 2 weeks with these 4 girls inside a 1-bedroom apartment getting ready to evacuate. I was in charge of 250 families, evacuating them out of the military base. In the end, we didn't evacuate, we stayed. But I could talk about that for a long time, but we'll move on. And soon I was pregnant with twins. And my babies were born in Okinawa, a neonatal hospital, because Tokyo did not have a neonatal hospital. So after Japan, we went to Guam, and things looked a bit different for me. There were random large animals. Kids started preschool, and there they are going to in their little school uniforms. And I started into more of a mom mode. Eventually, I did start working as a scuba instructor for a company in Guam and I got my scuba instructor license. So I basically, once again, was back to doing everything underwater, even Christmas. So now I'm a master scuba instructor, so I can teach any type of diving in any location into any depths. And eventually I put my ship work to use and got my 100-ton captain's license, which allows me to operate a ship that's about the size of a Seattle ferry. And life changes, stuff happens, and I soon found myself to be on the way to Hawaii as a single parent on military orders. However, Hawaii was not in my budget. So I got a sailboat, and I lived on my sailboat down in Sand Island for a while, for about 2 years. And there is my daughter, my son following my footsteps. My daughter learned to drive a little boat. She's driving like a 16-foot whaler. My son is learning scuba diving. But I needed a career that could support me and 2 kids. And I needed something that was not ships, because ships are gone for 6 months and then you're home for 1 month if you're lucky. And that wasn't going to be an option with 2 kids. So I decided, I know navigation. I liked my flying. A couple of times that I've been up, I'll go be an airline pilot. So every single person, doesn't matter if they're a fighter pilot or an airline pilot, starts in an airplane that's like this, a trainer airplane, a small one. Single engine, very small horsepower, usually a Cessna or a Piper. And so if you want to fly this, you got to fly this first. So after about a year, I learned to fly on my own. This is a picture from my first flight, all by myself, no instructor, just me in an airplane. So you learn to fly lots of different airplanes as on your way up to working on those. So one of those is a tail wheel, and sometimes those don't have doors. So you just progress through the planes. So my kids were basically being raised in the back of an airplane. There they are. You know, they weren't always a big fan of being in the back of the airplane. But nonetheless, we got the job done. This is my dear friend Jana, and it was because of Jana that I got to go here. Here's me at NASA for the first launch of civilians to the International Space Station. And I finally got to 500 hours and learned to fly an airplane with 2 engines. That took about 5 to 6 years. 500 hours allowed me then to be hired by an airline. And I was hired by Mokulele Airline here in Hawaii. And one of my great honors was I got to fly a Rosie the Riveter. There's actually, Rosie the Riveter lives in Maui. I flew her from Maui to Honolulu for a celebration. So there she is, one of the few remaining alive. This is the North Shore of Molokai. I've been all over the world, and it's still one of the most beautiful places on the world. It's breathtaking. So if you ever get a chance to fly a small plane over the North Shore of Molokai, you should definitely do that. And there I was again on my same route, going through the Hawaiian Islands, this time by plane. Some fun pictures I took from the airplane. This is Honolulu or Oahu. And another full circle moment for me that always made me happy was I would fly over the cruise ship where I had first left Indiana to go to Hawaii. And I would see the small cruise ship from the sky where I had started my adventure. Soon I transferred from this airplane to this airplane. And that was an adjustment. There's lots of mechanics, lots of, not really mechanics, more like computer automated things. This is inside the simulator for the first time when I took off and landed in an airliner. Simulator training, total for an airline, it's about 6 months. And I was ready to get my cool uniform and hit the skies with my nice jet. I was going to go fly in Alaska State, where it was negative 40 degrees. And from Hawaii to Alaska State is also an adjustment. I did get to fly to the top of Alaska to Prudhoe Bay. So that was something. Soon though, they let me fly sometimes to the cooler, warmer spots, which brings us to this picture again. Meanwhile, I met this woman named Allie Dunnington. She's the world record holder and female balloonist. She has flown 120 countries. Her husband was the world record with 127. She's a female world record holder. Unfortunately, he died of COVID in Jordan on an expedition, and she wanted to keep his memory alive and continue the expeditions and break his record. So she started talking about starting an expedition. So about a year ago, her and I started planning this next expedition to break the world record. Meanwhile, my babies had turned into teenagers, and I was living in Alaska and they were in Hawaii, and it just wasn't sitting well with me. Things weren't as they should be in my mind, and so I made the difficult decision to resign from the airline. So in collaboration with Allie, I formed Gone with the Wind Adventure, which is a travel adventure company, taking people on adventures. In March, we went to Oman, country 120, and we flew the hot air balloon. This is from Misfa. It's a mountain town. Lots of camels. This is from Bahala Fort. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. If you've taken any of Professor Scotti's classes, you'll learn about Arabic art. This is a good representation of a lot of those structures. It goes back, Bahala's back to 3000 BCE. And here's a cross section of a house from the mud brick. In that UNESCO World Heritage Site, you could just walk around anywhere, but you'll see the Quran there on the top. Which brings us to today. So we will do Africa this November, starting November through December. We've added on the Serengeti, climbed Kilimanjaro, and probably Victoria Falls in Zambia. And then next year, we'll do the western part of Africa. We'll also do Japan, Egypt, Jordan, and Oman again. We take 8 people, so it's small group adventure. The first leg, which will be Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, is full, but we have the other 2 legs open, some spaces there. And my favorite quote, well, one of my favorite quotes, I got lots of quotes, but travel far enough, you meet yourself. So I encourage everybody to explore the world, and you just learn what you can. All right, I'll turn it back to you.
I am speechless.
Well, thanks.
I don't think I ever met anybody like you. I'm sure I haven't in my entire life. I think there could only be one of you in the entire universe. You
Yeah,
are beyond amazing. There aren't any words in the dictionary to describe you.
Well, thank you. Thanks.